G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you, and our guest today is Ritesh Patel. He's a CEO and co-founder of Ticket Fairy, which he founded with his brother in 2011. Ticket Fairy is a next-generation event ticketing, marketing and revenue acceleration platform, providing event promoters and venue managers the tools necessary to increase attendance, social media exposure and consumer engagement, helping large and small events maximize their revenue potential in North America, in Australia, in New Zealand, India, Europe, and beyond. He's a British-born serial entrepreneur. Ritesh is a Y Combinator alumni and smart, talented developer with a passion for technology and building great products. Also joining us is Andy Anderson from Faculty Entertainment. We're going to talk about ticketing. We're going to talk about some of the problems that Ritesh and Ticket Fairy have been solving. It's going to be a great and wide-ranging conversation. Let's dive in. Andy and Ritesh, g'day. Welcome to you. Where in the world are we talking to you from at the moment? Andy, where are you at?
Well, Faculty Entertainment and I am based in Los Angeles, and I'm coming from Los Angeles today.
All right, and Ritesh, whereabouts are you?
I'm in Tulum in Mexico.
Tulum, Mexico. Is that a home base for you? Is this a part of workplace? What's the go?
I don't have a home, unfortunately. I spend all my time on the road building the company. Tulum is actually one of our hotspots for clients, and so I'm here quite a lot.
Well, all right. So we obviously wanted to get you on the show today to talk about the Ticket Fairy. You're obviously traveling a lot, as you just mentioned, so you're all over the place. Even I was on the site today. I'm from Australia, and there's a heap of events, heaps of venues in Australia using the Ticket Fairy. How did the idea for Ticket Fairy come about?
So actually, randomly, I was living in Sydney at the time. So I lived in Australia for about 6 years. And that was after about almost a decade, I'd say, of throwing events in the UK. So Ticket Fairy comes from a real solve your own problem perspective. So I'd produced 400 or so events myself, being very, very heavy on using technology to market those events. And over the best part of a decade, you realize what the problems are in the industry. And fortunately, having an engineering background, it was possible to both conceive the idea for the company and actually build it.
So you had an engineering background and you had a promoting background. That doesn't sound like a particularly common combination there.
It's absolutely not very common. I mean, just as an example, I threw essentially it was my first rave when I was 19, and that was live streamed over a dial-up 56K connection, audio stream, streamed up to a server in a data center pre-cloud, and then marketed in chat rooms and news groups and forums, and people actually listened in real time. And I had to put my massive PC in the back of my car and run a 30-foot audio cable from the stage. There wasn't a cable long enough, so I had to use joiners to connect two audio cables into a Sound Blaster card and a 56K modem to send the audio uplink.
You know, I haven't heard anybody mention Sound Blaster card in like 2 decades, I reckon. That's amazing, man.
Decades ago. It was January 2000, so yeah, it was that long ago.
All right, so you mentioned you were solving your own problems. I mean, as an event organizer, as an event host, what kind of problems are we talking about? Because from a consumer perspective, I'm thinking about there's a band I want to see, or an event I want to go to. I go to the website, buy a ticket, rock up, show them, a QR code. Seems pretty simple from my perspective. From the other side, what kind of problems are we actually solving there?
Well, from the other side, it's completely different. From the other side, as an event producer, particularly an independent event producer, but generally all event producers, you are struggling to actually have the event break even on its costs. So I would say at least 2/3 of events run at a loss. Any new brand that you launch will run at a loss for between 3 and 5 years. You have no idea if you've broken even, oftentimes even halfway through the event, because you haven't tallied up all the revenue streams. And it's a passion-driven business. So when you lose money on an event, you're likely to find that money from somewhere, either subsidizing with a day job, which is what I did for a decade, or if it's on a bigger scale and you're a festival producer, it's not uncommon to refinance your house and, unlock $500,000 in equity or whatever it is, and pay the talent that you can't afford to pay because you didn't sell enough tickets.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, you said that you've put on hundreds of events at this stage. Who would put on an event if they're all losing money, or you don't know if you're going to make money even to halfway through the event? How are people putting on events?
Why are they putting on events, or how? Because they're two very, very different things.
Well, yeah, why? I mean, obviously, there's got to be a sense of a passion about it. But then if you are not sure you're going to even break even, or you're mortgaging your house to put on the event, then surely there's a little bit more to the why behind just, I really enjoy live music or raves or events.
And that's the big thing behind this, right? Is that when you do it as an event producer, you have something to bring to the world. So you're gathering a community that you want to gather together that don't have something that similar to what you want to do. You're creating experience that you don't think exists yet. You're exposing talent that you don't think has the right platform, or other people aren't showcasing, or if they're showcased somewhere else, they're not being showcased in the town that you live in or the city that you live in. There's something that you're trying to bring to the world, and it could be a combination of all of them, but it's a very, very personal expression. And because it's a personal expression, and essentially it's art, it really is art, you take it really badly when something is not attended very well. And it's the biggest buzz in the world when an event is packed and you're thinking to yourself, all the people in this room that have had the time of their lives are here because of me. The experience I've curated, the talent I've booked, they're having an amazing time because this experience has been curated. And that's pretty addictive. Like, that's a massive dopamine hit, and you'll keep on doing it if you do get those successful events, but you're absolutely willing to take the hit if it doesn't go as planned.
Yeah, right. So I mean, some of the kind of why behind what you're just talking about there sounds very similar to like the startup founder's journey, where they think, there's something I want to bring to the world, or a problem I want to solve, and surely I'm the person that can make that happen. Or if I build it, that will come. There's a little bit of that, but then you have some success. Then you want to do it again, like you're saying, actually feel the rush or the dopamine hit of actually bringing something to life.
Yep.
Part art, part kind of entrepreneurship, part
mission.
solving, part what, sorry?
Part mission.
Part mission? Yeah, absolutely. And so during that time...
I'll be honest, the first slide on my pitch deck literally says event organizers run at a loss for 3 to 5 years. They risk millions, just like a startup.
Yeah. Well, so in that process for you then, you said the idea came from personal experience and solving personal problems. When it comes to actually trying to be an event organizer, how did the idea for Ticket Fairy come about? What does that actually look like? Can you talk us through that process?
So the concept was now obvious, but back then it was not obvious at all. The idea behind the original inception of the platform was that as an event organizer, I have a specific audience that already attends my events. They're the ones that are buying tickets already. They've seen what I'm doing. They have bought into that concept or product or whatever it is. But most of the time, I don't have enough of those people. I don't have enough of a marketing budget. I don't have an unlimited reach. So how do I solve that? And the light bulb moment was, well, if there's people already paying for my product, which is the event, once they finish paying for the product, why would I not just incentivize them to bring similar people, and also make them feel like they're the ringleaders in their group of actually bringing people to that event that they've just paid for, and actually pay them and give them the ability to earn back the money they just spent. And as the event organizer, I get distribution to people that I can't reach myself, and it becomes a rewards platform, and the fans feel looked after, and the people that are the most passionate get to go to gigs for free. At the same time, that actually helps to push my event into profit, and for once, I'm actually making money.
Okay, so if we're just trying to roll that back, came primarily from or initially from how do I actually engage with my customers better? How do I reward them and actually use customers as advocates for more customers? That's the dream for any business, really.
Absolutely.
There wasn't a mechanism for that already?
Not well done. No, there were external platforms that loosely integrated with ticketing platforms. There were ambassador systems, but nothing really that had the full stack. And there's a lot of things you need to do to execute something very, very well, where the fans don't feel like they're being spammed, or it's clunky, or it's like, it feels like they're pushing a product to their mates just to earn some money. Like there's a lot of psychology you have to really navigate to make it feel natural. And so that took a while, but really it's a survival instinct, right? As the event producer, what you're trying to do is, like any startup founder, you're trying to stay alive. If you stay alive you could be the next Coachella. If you don't stay alive for long enough, that dream will never get realized. You'll never become big enough. So you need distribution. You need passionate fans. It's like any startup growth phase, right? Like it's the most happy customers that are referring other customers. So if you apply that to events, then that could be enough to actually keep you alive for enough time to be the next big thing. If you run out of money and you die after a year, you're never going to realize your vision. You could be the best event producer in the world, have the most incredible imagination, be able to uncover the best talent. If you don't stay alive long enough and you don't have the financial resources, you die and you're done.
Yeah, gotcha. And so this is where being an event host and organizer and also someone who can code comes in really handy for you. So you're actually the person on the tools. Like how did you build a team? How did you actually start from an idea and then actually start to bring that to life? What did it look like for you?
So, I mean, I'm very lucky, right? I started coding when I was 9 years old. So that stuff comes naturally. My day job that was subsidizing the events that I was running was in ad tech and digital marketing. I was building big data systems. I was a cloud architect at an ad network. So I knew how to handle high amounts of traffic, storing huge amounts of data, all of that stuff that usually you'd have to pay a really expensive engineer for, or multiple. And that skill was in-house. I'd already been building businesses with my brother, and we'd done a bunch of things on the digital marketing side. And so we decided to create this company together, and we have very complementary skill sets. So, while I'm writing code and running around doing sales meetings, he was able to create the structure that we needed to have longevity and make sure that we were a real company. And it's a perfect combination. But yeah, being the engineer that can build and can build to scale is very handy, because you can do stuff that's very low cost. You're paying like, I started sleeping on floors. You give up $100,000 job in Sydney, living by the beach, and you start crashing on friends' floors. You move back in with your parents. You get a government grant for like $50,000 and use that to pay for servers. You become scrappy, and that's the way it needs to be until you get your first check.
And so you go into business with your brother. You said you had complementary skills. How did you go? I mean, that seems to be like either a really awesome idea or a potentially kind of really fraught idea going into business with family. I mean, you can tell your brother knows things about, there's no kind of hiding. You know each other probably better than anybody else in the world, but how did that actually go, I guess, presenting the idea to him in the first place? Or was this an idea that came about through discussions with him?
We built a couple of businesses together, so we already knew how it was to work with each other. And from that, we really realized that there is implicit trust. We will work a 24-hour day if needed. If we live in different time zones, we can cover things when the other person's sleeping. There's absolute trust. We're never going to screw each other over. One of the biggest causes of a startup failing is founder fallout. That's not going to happen. If we do have an argument, it'll be forgotten about a few days later or within hours. And there's a common mission, right? Which is you do stuff for the good of your family. And I think that's actually worked really well for us.
That sounds actually really amazing. Andy, I want to bring you in on this. So Ritesh has already spoken a little bit about how do we get the end user, if you like, more involved? How do we get our customers more involved? What does it look like from, I mean, it seems to me that over the last 10 years in the entertainment industry in general, that's been one of the kind of key or core approaches is how do we actually connect with our end users? How do we go direct to those people in terms of like entertainment more generally? Obviously, Ticket Fairy's doing that. What are some of the other kinds of ways that companies are looking to connect with their end user directly, get them more involved in the purchases, in the promotion, on the day, that kind of stuff? What does it look like?
There has been a trajectory around direct-to-consumer businesses. And, we've seen obviously that with social media and e-commerce have been probably the two biggest movements for fans to start to feel closer to, entertainment properties or personas, artists, athletes, entertainers. And so that's been huge. But now we're seeing a huge a trend towards, while that works for fans to start to feel closer to those folks, quite often for those folks, the stakeholders, the IP owners, the artist, the athlete, the entertainer themselves, the promoter in Ritesh's case, they've been dependent on a lot of third-party platforms and reliant on them in order to be in contact with their consumer, and they're often left out when it comes to having that content consumption, the behavior, the analytics that come from that. More importantly, the purchase data, the purchase information that comes with that. And so now there's a movement of starting to move out those third-party tech platforms and try to go even more direct to consumer, and starting to try to build that connection so that they can kind of know they can KYC themselves. They can know their customer and then carry that data along with them through all their different, iterations of what their entertainment property does. So if they're in touring, if they're in merchandising, if they're in long-form pay-per-view content, if they're in other areas, there's a movement now towards trying to bring that whole digital ecosystem into one central location, which is a branded experience for the fans, but also it's a platform that artists and entertainers can retain that customer information so they can retain that customer relationship. And that customer relationship, I think, is what a lot of platforms, and especially what we've learned from Ritesh, is a lot of focus on owning and maintaining that customer relationship, because that's so powerful.
Yeah, right. So Ritesh, what does that look like for Ticket Fairy? What does it look like? How have you gone over the last 10 years and in solving those initial problems that you were solving, but then as you get more into the development of things, obviously you understand more of the problem and more nuance of the problem and different verticals of how we can solve or bring a better product to the market. Where were the gaps, the kinds of things that Andy's just been talking about, and how have you sought to and ended up solving some of those problems?
So when we started this was very much a revenue driving mechanism that felt really good to the fans. Over time, a lot of things came to light that were kind of obvious things, but we as a company have always been opportunistic in what we build. So we built the reward system that then surfaced data on who was driving the most sales, so you could really figure out who are the super fans, how much revenue they're driving. Then there was an event that we brought on board as a client in 2014. And with that, we spec'd our own internal secondary market, and we worked hand in hand with the client. I flew to Berlin to meet with them, and we spent an afternoon whiteboarding this kind of what's good for the fan secondary market, because they were starting to sell out in record time. And so we built something where you had to name every ticket. You had to show the photo ID when collecting your wristband for the festival that would match the name on the ticket. That typically is too restrictive. So then we added as part of that speccing process, a waitlist post sellout to gauge additional demand for tickets, as well as the identities of people who didn't have tickets yet because the event had sold out. And then we added a workflow into the system so that once you had your ticket, maybe you bought it 3, 4, 6 months early, and it was tied to your name. The only way to transfer that to someone else was to log into your account and either send a peer-to-peer invitation to a friend to buy it, or to just say, hey, look, I bought too early. My plans have changed. I can't use that ticket anymore. And find me a buyer. And then we would then match that seller with someone first come, first served on the wait list with an expiry time of how long they had to buy it before it went on to the next person. And in both those scenarios, when either someone you've invited directly or someone on the wait list gets an email from us saying that there's a ticket that's available, there's no direct money transfer between seller and buyer. Or buyer and seller rather. The buyer clicks on the invitation link, they go to the website, they fill in their billing information. It bypasses the ticket page entirely because they're buying something that's essentially out of inventory, but we're overriding that for that particular session. They put in their credit card information and they pay. And then once that payment clears, the original seller gets an email saying the ticket's been sold, their card has been refunded, the QR code on the original ticket's been canceled and it's no longer usable. And the new buyer gets a fresh QR code that only they have access to. They know they're buying a real ticket from the original primary source. They know that even if they're buying from a stranger, the ticket's real. They're not sending money over PayPal or Venmo to a stranger to then not get a ticket, or have the original seller still show up at the venue and scan the original QR code and it be marked as used when you show up. All of that goes away. It's completely safe. And essentially we act as escrow. So that was kind of the second major thing that we built. And then over time, we started building a bunch more analytics elements to the platform, ways for operations to be more streamlined, and more recently, a CRM showing historical data, customer LTVs, lifetime revenue spend, as well as revenue influence. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff the way we look at it is there's 10 ways that every event producer is leaving money on the table. I think we can automate 5 of them, and we have done. And then the other 5, you can provide the tools for the client themselves to execute that strategy to unlock that revenue.
So
Ritesh,
what about...
Sorry, Don,
can
I ask a question of Ritesh real quick? We're all consumers of tickets, right? We all have our own experiences with all the different variety of tickets we've bought through our personal lives. But could you help us understand the size of the ticketing market? What's the volume of tickets sold? Just some people who maybe don't work in ticketing each day, don't understand sort of the size of the market, but more importantly, the opportunity. You were talking about promoters are leaving a bunch of money. There's 10 ways that promoters are leaving money on the table. What's the gap there for them? Are they losing 50% of their capital? Like, is there, if we look at the ticketing market at large, where are the huge gaps there? What are the size of the opportunities? And where do you feel like Ticket Ferry is positioned to approach that and sort of solve for that gap?
So we typically say to someone, if you just list your event with us instead of what you've been using before, and we become your main place to buy, or the only place to buy, it's typically a instant 15 to 25% uplift in revenue without lifting a finger. And that's just on the top line sales in terms of how many more tickets we think we can generate in an automated way. Once you get to a sellout, then the secondary market kicks in, and even though you can't sell as a consumer a ticket for a profit, there are ways to unlock revenue because people often sell back the early bird tickets that they've purchased. Maybe it's a $50 ticket at the time they purchased because they bought it 6 months before the event. So they're after their $50 refund, right? And at the time of sellout, that final tiered ticket might be $150. And whoever puts themselves on the wait list after the event sold out is basically signing up to try and buy a $150 ticket, but there's none left and there's no more available, so they can't. So in that scenario, you can give someone back their $50 that they paid, and the new buyer will pay the face value that they sign up to pay. They're not paying above face value. They're still paying the final price, which would be the $150. And now the event's just made another $100. So you've given the consumers a way to safely buy early, get their money back if they can't attend. You've given someone a way to buy a ticket at face value once an event's sold out, rather than being screwed on a secondary market. That's a complete third-party system. And you've given a way for the event organizer to make more money from the resale instead of it going to scalpers. So things like that really help. And then we have other parts of the platform that increase conversion rates on marketing. There's other ways that we can bring in enough operational data that allows business decisions to be made. I mean, there's a bunch of things, but ultimately, instantly you get 50 to 25% more revenue. And then over time, we could probably help you to double the revenue, because we've helped events to accelerate the rate of sales to a point where they sell out a month and a half early. And we've built demand, like we've collected, say, 10,000 emails on the waiting list post sellout, and accelerate their rate of sales. So now they've not only got the demand building up, but they can go to whichever city they're in and say, hey, look, we need a bigger permit because we've got demand for this many more tickets. And now they have time to actually bring in the requirements that relevant licensing authority needs. And once they implement that, they get a bigger license and they can sell double the number of tickets. We actually helped an event to actually double their sales and bring in another $1 million in tickets. So there's a lot of opportunity to bring in significant revenue and actually become the growth partner for an event producer.
So if you're making it better for the venues, making it better for the event organizers, making it better for the consumers, obviously you kind of reckon a few scammers and scalpers along the way. So how come everybody in ticketing isn't doing this? How have you solved this? Where other people are either failing to do it? Is it a question of the will? Is it a question of just incumbency? Is it a question of technical ability? How come this isn't becoming something that everybody's doing?
So I'll be honest, I'd say 4 or 5 years, no one would write us a check. Everyone would go, it's too competitive, or they would say, I'd be in the room pitching a VC and I'd be like, here's all the things that we want to build. There's 10 layers. There's all these different modules that we need to build, or that we want to build, because we think there's a real problem to solve. And every single time when we would get a no, and that would be 95% of the time, actually 100% of the time for the first few years, the VCs would go, either it's too competitive, or you're trying to do too much. Do one thing and do it well. And in startups, typically that's the right advice, do one thing and do it well. But for us, our one thing was make event producers more revenue. And unfortunately, the way to do that is to do 10 things on the technical level. That takes a lot of grit and 10 years to build. And a lot of people don't have that patience. And many times you could be a really gifted engineer, but if you haven't gone through the real pain of being an event producer, you're not going to build the right product.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, man, there's so many different threads that I'm keen to go down, from the event hosting thread, from the technological thread, from the startup kind of thread. So many things you're doing. But what I want to ask, I guess, primarily is when it comes to your mission with changing the live ticketing, the live events industry, what does it ideally look like, say, in fast forward 5 or 10 years' time? What do you hope changes about the whole live events, live music, event hosting and ticketing, maybe specifically, industry? What are you hoping what are some of the changes that you are? I mean, obviously, you're hoping to serve your clients and customers really well. But as you do that, other people will have to change how they do it because your proposition becomes too attractive. So what are you hoping changes?
So, to me, and I've said this always, ticketing is the least exciting part of our business. It's the most boring. If you think about the ticketing side of things, right, it's a transaction. What's really exciting is to help creatives eat. And that's a very broad statement. But if you think about touring artists, they no longer make money from music. They make money from gigs. And actually, playing live to their fans, right? That's their primary source of living now. It's not music, it's not vinyl sales, it's not streaming, it's performing in front of an audience, and you need the room as full as possible. Now, the event promoter that is booking you to play is essentially signed a contract that says, I guarantee this artist $50,000 in performance fees. They are contractually obliged to pay that $50,000, which is why oftentimes if an event loses money, the promoter will mortgage their house, because if they don't pay that contractually obligated fee, then the agency that they've put that artist through, which represents another 100 artists, will no longer work with you and you're blacklisted, right? So now you will find that money wherever possible to pay those fees so that the artists can actually make a living. So now you as the event promoter eats last. You're at the very bottom of the food chain. You have to pay all your vendors, you have to pay all your talent. Now, what happens if you have a bad gig and you have no more capital left? You've already mortgaged your house, you can't find investors, and you go out of business. If you're a 100,000 person festival or even a 50,000 person festival in a mid-sized city, you're probably responsible for a very large percentage of the annual GDP. So you, as one small independent business going out of business, now the hotels have lost out, the bars and restaurants have lost out, all the workers have lost out, all the equipment providers and the vendors have lost out, because one company failed, another 10 or 15 businesses might also fail, and there's a massive knock-on effect. So from my perspective, if we keep the event promoters in business, everybody eats. And that is a really nice mission to have.
Yeah, actually, that's really wonderful. Actually, it's right. This is a good mission. So what are some of the things that you are specifically doing? So again, I'm keep coming back to the problems that you're solving. Seems like there are very specific, almost niche problems, but they have really broad effects and a really long tail in terms of who they affect and how those people are affected, just like you're mentioning there. And so perhaps what are some of the other kinds of ways that you're engaging with venues and hosts and event organizers and artists? How are you actually doing that? How are you benefiting that? You mentioned a few before, like in terms of things like I love the idea of if you have a wait list, then for the event organizer, maybe even for the artist, you're building your contact list, like your CRM, not just by the people who are there in the room or the people who originally bought the tickets, but potentially many, many more. But then also those other kinds of things like what you're selling on the night, sales after the night, those kinds of things. How are you helping all of those areas and those people?
So a lot of this, as I was saying, is building layers of technology over time. So we start with the tickets. You start with the tickets, which have a reward system attached. Then you add the secondary market and resale. Then over time, we've added ways to book table service at a high-end nightclub or something like that, where they're charging, say, $5,000. And those people have VIP tables, but then there's also general admission tickets. Typically, those are two separate systems, and we've combined those into one so that the venue has one unified system for both of those things. Their affiliates can sell both types of products through one unified link. They can also look at fan influence, that this person that bought a $50 ticket not only influenced $100 VIP sales, but they also managed, some of their friends are wealthier and they spend money on $5,000 tables. None of that data is typically linked. So what you really need to help the venues to understand is not only who's in the room, but how valuable those people are. And oftentimes the people that are valuable are not the ones that spend the most money themselves, but they're the ones that can bring in the most money over a longer period of time, right? So that stuff is very fragmented. And you might bring an external marketing team. They will do the best that they can with whatever ticketing platform you're using. But actually, you should be doing what startups do, and you should be having 20 landing pages for your event, and you should be A/B testing them, and you should be sending different audiences to different landing pages. Well, we can do that, and you're going to get way more bang for your buck on your marketing spend. And over time, you just realize what gaps there are. And we're very, very close to our clients. So every client is in a WhatsApp group. I drove 2 hours today to meet a client of ours that has multiple venues in Mexico. And those are when and even the initial conversation when they haven't even decided to use you yet, we consult. We're like, where are your gaps in your business, both operationally, data-wise, ticketing, revenue gaps? What are you doing manually? How many systems are you using to do this? All of that stuff is consultancy. You need to talk to your customers every single day and then actually take notice of what they're saying and make your own observations to build the best product. And that's not just a 10-year thing. Like that's your life's work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're looking at so what I'm hearing you say is that you've got a bunch of kind of stakeholders and people that you're trying to serve. You want to serve the end user really well, and you've spoken a little bit about how do you utilize some kind of sales psychology without, while still honoring those people and not trying to just manipulate them for more sales. But then also your key constituency is those event organizers. That's what I'm hearing?
Yeah, because it's got to be an everyone wins model, right? So you can never screw over the fan. The fan is our client's customer, right? So they always have to feel looked after. So at no point can you ever mess with the end user, because the end user is the one who pays everyone's bills, right? So we've done everything with the perspective of the fans have to have the best experience. They should never feel ripped off. They should feel rewarded. They should feel recognized. That's very, very important, because essentially we're the front face for the event organizers, right? We're their shop front. We are who they send people to. And then, but also each fan is, it's a $100 transaction. It's a $20 transaction. It could be a $500 transaction for one event, but there's thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of those for each client. And so we have to make sure that we keep that client in business. We make sure their team can do their jobs correctly. We build the platform in a way where it's more of a parallel to something like Salesforce than it is Eventbrite or Ticketmaster. Like from my perspective, everyone who works for a venue or an events business logs into Ticket Fairy in the morning when they do their job, and they each use one or more components, and there is a single source of truth, and they are all collaborating in the same system to create success for their events. And that's really the vision.
Yeah, gotcha.
Ritesh, can I ask a question too? How does somebody, you mentioned somebody who works for an event company coming in and logging into Ticket Fairy in the morning using one of the tools that you're providing. Does that also include the brand and sponsor departments? And how are people working with brands in order to connect them with the event goers in some sort of, is there an optimized way? Is there a room to improve on the old system of what that is, what that relationship looks like?
So we do unlock a lot of data on the end ticket buyer and aggregate that for the event producer. So we kind of act as their in-house data scientist, and we crunch a lot of information. And demographic information is something that we have multiple data partners that we can say, okay, this email address just bought a ticket. What do you know about that person? And they will give us data structures on the public, legally available information about those people. And then we will aggregate that and say, okay, well, there's 10,000 people coming to your event, and the type of people that are coming to your event are executives or VCs or marketing directors, people with this range of household income, people who drive these types of cars, this percentage of homeowners. And that is very, very valuable data to go to sponsors with. Going forward, the plan is to have a sponsorship marketplace where we can have a brand or an agency that deploys capital for a brand log into our backend and say, okay, Q1 of 2025, this client we have has $500,000 to deploy in Texas. And they're looking for women aged 18 to 27 because they're launching a new product. We would typically say, okay, well, that's your parameters. And we would, in this platform that we want to bring to market, would say, okay, well, these these users within Texas match this demographic, and then go one layer deeper and say, well, they attend these 5 events. And so you should sponsor this event, and this event, because you're going to hit your target audience.
That sounds super powerful, actually, for event organizers. On top of what you were saying before, so organizers and sponsors can connect better with people who, I mean, are their potential customers. But then also, you mentioned before about if you had somebody who invited, say, 10 friends or 30 friends, or you invited somebody who then invited 20 friends, to be able to go to that individual next time and say, hey, we are organizing this person to come out. You might really like it. You should invite some friends. Just another way, like I'm just thinking in terms of like that, the kind of micro influencer style.
For that event, you upgrade them with a backstage experience. We've had people generate 56 ticket sales, 75 ticket sales. I mean, like crazy numbers. And they didn't get any benefit beyond, like they could have earned a free ticket if they generate 8, but they still do it because they want to gather their group and they want to be recognized. We have a public leaderboard that people move up as they're generating more sales, and it makes them feel recognized. I've had people walk up to me, and like actual people walk up to me at events and go, I'm number 1 on the leaderboard at this event, and it's super exciting and I'm so happy.
That's awesome. That is really cool. I still love the idea of, if you have that info in real time, being able to actually pull those people in and say, yeah, we're going to give you that upgraded ticket. I think that kind of stuff.
You can get the artist meet and greet. Yeah, you can do the artist meet and greet. You can even say, and going back to that kind of brand platform, this is how painful it is at the moment for an event organizer. If they're trying to bring in sponsorship revenue to try and fill some of the gaps in money that they don't have, they might have to craft 20 pitch decks for 20 brands that are very tailored to that brand. And then try and scour LinkedIn or Instagram to try and get to someone within that company and work their way up the decision tree to get that deck to someone that can actually authorize giving them money. And that's a very painful process. Whereas this way around, we would be able to tell a brand, this is the event you should sponsor because they're perfect for you. And there'd be an inbound request to the promoter saying, hey, this brand wants to give you money and you don't have to beg for it. Completely flips it.
Okay, so actually building like a marketplace for sponsors where you have that data on, say you've sold 5,000 tickets already to an event, and you can say, oh, we have this kind of demographic already coming to this event. Potential sponsors could come into like a marketplace of events and say, hey, this is the demographic I want to hit, and could find those events. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. The brand would go, I've got this much money to spend, and we'd say, give it to these ones because they're perfect for you.
That sounds awesome. And then what are the big use cases of blockchain technology for like the last 6 or 7 years? One of the big things has been, the blockchain is going to solve ticketing because we'll be able to get rid of scalpers because there'll be a on-chain single source of truth. This is where the tickets are going to be found, and yet there aren't really. I mean, I don't want to kind of talk down any competitors or people who are trying to make really good use of technology, but it seems to be that promise hasn't really delivered. I know you've been speaking at blockchain and Web3 conferences and on panels and things like this. How are you utilizing any of this kind of technology? What does that look like? How has that kind of hype failed to materialize? Do you have any kind of thoughts around that arena?
Way too many. So I was pretty fortunate to be very heavily immersed in the blockchain community quite early on. And it got to around 2017, and people would start asking me, fairly accomplished people within blockchain would start asking me to speak on panels about blockchain technology with regards to entertainment and events and ticketing, which I did. And that led to a bunch of high-end panels I spoke on. There was a blockchain and music panel in Toronto at Canadian Music Week. There was a New Kids on the Blockchain panel at a festival, actually, that Skrillex's label Owser was curating. And I did a lot of those panels, and I think people were very confused at the time because they were like, 4 out of 5 panelists were blockchain VCs, people building new protocols, wallet apps or whatever it was. And there's like this one dude, me, on a panel who publicly, and whose company publicly does zero on with regards to blockchain, which is really quite weird for a lot of people, I think. And I got nominated by people to speak on those panels because I probably had a level of understanding about the industry that maybe people that were building blockchain companies didn't have, because they weren't event producers, they weren't marketers, they didn't necessarily have the real deep understanding of the problems of the industry. And they were building these blockchain ticketing ICOs purely on the consumer problem. And they didn't really have this in-depth knowledge. So 2017, 2018, there were a lot of ticketing ICOs where they were like, blockchain technology is going to solve all the problems in ticketing. Blockchain is the savior. This is it. Where Ticketmaster's done, everyone's done. StubHub is gone. Blockchain is the solution. And the implementation was just never right. It was like, okay, you need to buy Ether, then you need to load it into a wallet, then you need to convert it to this other coin, which is the ticketing platform's coin, and then you need to use that to buy tickets. Well, that's stupid. Or they'd go, well, you as the event producer need to buy our coin to list your event in the first place, and then we might only take payments in our coin or whatever. And again, that's dumb, right? So it was either technologically prohibitive, or what was being built was literally was just building another transactional engine, which is ticketing, which is commoditized, which has no real value and is a race to zero on pricing. And you're not going to get those deals without paying millions of dollars to a venue to acquire their exclusive contract. So at the time, like, none of it felt right. And we had VCs saying, hey, we want you to launch a token. We'll fund you. We'll give you $500,000 to do the legal cost to be SEC compliant if you do a token and you give us a token warrant and all this kind of stuff. And we were just like, this makes no sense. And one of those panels that I spoke on, the one in Toronto about blockchain and music, the Canadian Music Week, there were questions from the panelists, well, from the moderator saying, how long is it going to take for blockchain technology to be mainstream? Why is blockchain technology not adopted yet? And I was like, look, blockchain tech needs to have an iPhone moment. It needs to be so easy to use for consumers that it's intuitive. If you have a blockchain-based app versus a traditional app, if the UX is identical and the features are identical, why would I use a blockchain-based app over a traditional one? Why would I move? I wouldn't. If the UX is worse, well, I'm definitely not going to move. And why should I even know that blockchain is involved? If I use the internet, and I said this at the time, I don't know as an internet user that I'm using TCP/IP and HTTPS and DNS. I don't know. And I shouldn't have to know. I should have a product that's intuitive and it provides some level of benefit to my life or my family. And if it's a blockchain-based solution, it should be significantly better benefits for me to even think about moving, and it should be equivalent or better UX, or I don't care.
Yeah, right. I mean, I totally agree. I've always spoken about this before. My thesis on Web3 and blockchain technology is the companies that are going to do the best are the ones that utilize it because it's actually a better, like a preferential software or dev stack, or delivers something unique and better that is actually almost invisible to the end user, unless it's using things like NFTs. But even then, people don't really care that it's an NFT on a blockchain. They care about, what does it look like? What does it unlock for me? What does it do? What's the utility?
Totally. And you've asked what we're doing in that. In the original boom, we didn't do anything in that. And over the last 2 years now, we've added more and more layers that are Web3 blockchain based, but again, very, very carefully and in a way where it actually makes sense and it's transparent, and it's lowering the barrier to entry for the technology or for consumers, or there's a real way to utilize whatever is being done blockchain-wise for the benefit of either the events business that is using that technology, or the consumer, or brand partners, or whatever it is, but it needs to make sense. And I think we built that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, is that why? So I'm interested. What motivated you to work with Faculty Group in particular, being a Web3 venture studio, and how did that connection come about for you?
I'm trying to think of who introduced us. I'm trying to think. Was it Polygon? I think maybe, but there was a really, really solid introduction that we got to Faculty, and we'd already deployed our first Web3 layers into the market. We built this very, very easy to use token gating system for live events, where we started getting adoption from some really, really well-known brands. DJs like Steve Aoki still use that functionality now to give benefits to his fans, and being able to attend his shows for free if you hold one of his tokens. And then we've actually had blockchain and Web3 investors since 2018. So it's not new that we have blockchain investors, because they kind of see the trajectory of where we might go with the company. But we got a lot more in the last 2 years, and part of that process ended up with an introduction to Faculty. And then I did a call with the guys and was like, look, this is what we're doing, and this is how we think that we're bridging Web 2 and Web 3, and pure Web 3 solutions are just not ready yet. And it's not even that the solutions aren't ready, the consumers aren't ready for them. So this is what we're doing, and this is our thesis, and the guys were super into it. And now we have a really, really good working relationship.
That's great, man. And so you mentioned it a little bit there. You've already broken into not so much necessarily a saturated market, but a really tightly held market. You're operating in multiple countries, across multiple time zones. You have this kind of behemoth incumbent in the industry. How are you approaching? I mean, Andy already mentioned Ticketmaster, but how are you approaching this? Again, this behemoth already in the industry. Are you trying to, go directly for customers? Are you just trying to build something better that's going to attract people? How do you break into a market that's so tightly held like ticketing?
I don't think most people realize that the ticketing market outside of the Ticketmaster Live Nations is actually really big. It's bigger than the actual Ticketmaster Live Nation. Like, it's huge.
So what does it look like then, in terms of, is it just you're just carving out your own piece of the pie, or you just do your own thing and don't really worry about what everybody else is doing? Is that part of the plan?
Absolutely. You do your own thing and don't worry about what anyone else is doing, because the right people who see value in what you're doing will come to you. I don't really think that, and this is the thing, when people did these blockchain ICOs back in 2017, 2018, their big thing was, we're going to take down Ticketmaster. And it's like, I don't think you understand that it's a vertically integrated business. They're the largest concert promoter in the world. As a concert promoter, they sell 500 million tickets a year as a concert promoter. Then they have the ticketing platform. Then they're in the venues, right? Like, they know what they're doing. Don't say you're going to take down Ticketmaster by building a ticketing company. It's the stupidest thing in the world. And it's like, why don't you just build the best product and find the huge market that exists outside of that, where those independents are not well funded and they need your help?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's really good advice for any startup founder, actually, not even just, the ones that you're specifically speaking to in that kind of market. But I think that's really good advice, is actually concentrate on the thing that you're doing. What is the problem that you're solving? How you best going to solve it? How you best going to treat your customers? I do find it interesting for Ticket Fairy, for you in particular, where you have so many layers of customers. So you've got a customer, but the customer has a customer, and the customer has their own kind of incentives and motivations as well. And then, your customer has multiple customers. And so, man, how do you approach that from a a kind of a curation perspective of how do you, or is it just the best you can look after those event promoters, everybody wins? Is that the case, or are there competing motivation?
Our original pitch deck had an everybody wins slide, so 100% that's what it needs to be.
Alrighty, well then let's talk about one thing. We've got only a couple of minutes left, but something you said earlier really interested me, which is how do you go about incentivizing your customers, so the end user, if you like, the people who are purchasing tickets, the concert goers or the people who are going to those events. How do you incentivize without slipping over into maybe manipulation? Or you talked about like a bunch of psychological principles or thinking or research that you've done to actually kind of maximize that. Can you walk me through what does that look like?
If you distill it down, it's actually not that difficult. Someone's just given you money, offer them that money back, make it so that it's natural that they want to go with other people and they get recognized for being the ringleader. Make it so that it's a no-lose scenario. If you share an event and someone doesn't buy a ticket because of you, it doesn't matter. You've already bought the product. You already want to see the artist. You already want to attend the festival. There's no downside. Make it so that it feels achievable to at least get something. And so you'll do it because why not?
Right. So they've already made the transaction because they want to go to the concert. They're happy to have paid the money. And so what you're doing is you're incentivizing them financially. You're incentivizing them socially, in a sense, by saying you could be on the leaderboard or help your friends come.
And socially in person, like the bigger group you have when you go to a gig, the more fun you have.
Yeah, truly. Simple as that. Okay. Well, so last question I'd like to ask is, do you have any particularly contrarian perspectives? Are there things that you think that nobody else thinks, but you wished other people thought that way? Or do you think it would help other people to think that way? Or do you hope nobody else thinks because you thinking that contrarian way is very valuable for you to think? Any of those that you're keen to share?
I do this all the time on panels. I mean, some of the things I've already said, which is like kind of the blockchain is the savior mentality doesn't work just from a technological level. Like there's a lot of things to solve. And so, you have these very heavy blockchain evangelists that just think that just because the technology exists, it can fix things, it can solve an entire industry. That's not the case. You don't often need blockchain. 99% of the time, you probably don't need blockchain. The other side, there was a panel that I was on probably a couple of years ago now. It was a Polygon Studios panel in Miami, and it was when Metaverse was like very new, and it was a Metaverse panel. And the subject came up of decentralized moderation on social networks. Like, Facebook was going down and no one, all social networks are going to be decentralized from now on, and moderation will be decentralized and you won't have censorship anymore. And that's a very, very idealistic point of view, right? And people think that that's wonderful. But I said something that was very contrarian to the crowd. I was like, look, Facebook just had this Libra project and it just fell apart. Like it was supposed to be this big thing and they had all these huge companies involved, and it was like, Visa and MasterCard were in it and Stripe was in it and all these huge companies, right? To build this Libra coin or Libra project. And one by one, people started pulling out. Now, there's a very good reason for that. If you don't own enough of something, you don't care. If there's decentralized moderation on a social network and someone owns 0.001% of the project, yeah, they might get a little upside in the coin that they hold. But if it's an entire company contributing to that, they probably don't care. They've got better things to do. And that's a really big downside to total decentralization. And I think it's something that people don't necessarily want to hear.
Yeah, especially those who are kind of all in on blockchain, especially when you say people who perhaps they don't need blockchain. So ones that actually do have a genuine use case and utility, go for it and then kind of build something great on top of it that's easy to use and supports and helps the end user rather than has multiple layers of barriers, but If you don't need it, then don't try to kind of bolt it on or squish it in somehow. Ritesh, thank you so much for joining us today. Andy, thanks heaps for joining us today. Andy, where can people find you online and find out more about Faculty Entertainment?
Facultyentertainment.com, and I'm a LinkedIn guy. So my world is really web 2.5 or even sometimes web 2.2, let's say. And LinkedIn seems to be the home for that. So you can find me on LinkedIn.
And Ritesh, where can people find out more or hear more from you personally, or find out more about Ticket Fairy generally?
I'd probably say ticketfairy.com and LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm on pretty much every major network, but I'd say Twitter and LinkedIn are the two. My Instagram's a little bit more a mix of events and music as well as the tech, but yeah, all of those work.
Alrighty. Thank you very much for joining us today, gentlemen. Great discussion. And I feel like, again, we just kind of scratched the surface of, we could have gone with a bunch of those things, but really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you both. See ya.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Off-Chain Podcast with our guest, Ritesh Patel. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. We love bringing you great guests like Ritesh. I hope we've inspired you to learn more about Web3, about technology, about future, about problem solving and startups. And as always, please like and subscribe, and better yet, spread the word, share this episode with a friend, and join us again next week for another great episode of the Off-Chain Podcast.